There is a spot at every garden centre in late August where the perennials go to be forgotten. Half price, half wilted, sitting in the sun because nobody wants to think about planting anything new this late in the year. You have probably stood in front of that table before. Maybe you walked away. Maybe you didn't. Here is the thing almost nobody tells you. August is not the dead zone you think it is. Spring gets all the credit, but the soil in August is warm all the way down, and warm soil is exactly what pushes a perennial to build a serious root system before winter locks everything in place. The plant might just sit there on top, doing nothing exciting to look at. Underneath, it is working. 11 perennials. Plant them once this August, do it properly, and you are not coming back to that clearance table next year or the year after that, or in some cases for the rest of your life. One of the plants on this list was put in the ground by someone's grandmother, and it is still blooming for her great-grandchildren today. Another one quietly fills in every bare patch in the bed without anyone lifting a finger. Stick around because the order actually matters here. If you are the kind of gardener who is tired of replacing the same 3 plants every single spring, go ahead and subscribe now. This channel exists to end that cycle, so let's get into it. Why August actually works. Quick science and then we move fast. Spring planting fights you the whole way. Cold snaps, sudden frost, soil that hasn't fully woken up yet. August flips that. The ground is already warm, which speeds up root cell division. Roots grow faster in warm soil than they do in cool spring soil, period. And because the plant isn't racing to put on a big flower show right this second, it sends its energy downward instead of upward, into the roots, where it actually matters for long-term survival. Here is the planting method that makes this work, and it takes about 10 minutes per plant. Dig the hole wide, roughly twice as wide as the root ball, but only as deep as the root ball itself. Too many people dig a hole like a bucket, deep and narrow, and that is backwards. You want wide and shallow, so the roots have loosened soil to spread sideways. Once the plant is sitting in the hole, mix the backfill soil with water right there until it turns into a thick mud. This sounds messy, and it is, but it gets rid of every air pocket around the roots, so there is no dry gap between the root and the actual soil. After that, lay down about 2 inches of mulch around the base, but keep it pulled back a few inches from the stem itself. Mulch piled against the crown holds moisture right where you don't want it, and that is how you get crown rot. Then water, deeply, every day or every other day for the first 2 to 3 weeks. After that, start easing off. By the time the first frost shows up, the roots should be settled enough to get through winter on rainfall alone. One more thing worth mentioning before we move on. This method only works if you match the plant to the site you actually have, not the site you wish you had. If your yard is heavy clay, don't fight it by trying to turn a shady, wet corner into a home for a plant that wants lean, dry soil. Every entry on this list has a section of the yard where it wants to live. Find that spot first, and the plant does most of the rest of the work itself. That's it, 2 to 3 weeks of real attention, and then these plants run themselves for decades. Let's get to the list. Number 11, Salvia Caradonna. Most people who want a perennial salvia end up with Maynight at the garden centre, because it's usually the only one on the shelf. Maynight looks great in the pot. Then a heavy summer rain comes through, and the whole thing flops sideways and never really recovers its shape for the rest of the season. Caradonna fixes that. The stems are dark, almost black and noticeably stiffer, so the plant stays upright through wind and rain that would flatten its cousin. You get spires of deep violet flowers from late spring into midsummer, and if you cut it back hard after that first flush, it usually gives you a second, lighter round of blooms in early fall. Plant it in full sun, in soil that drains reasonably well, and that's the whole task. No staking, no fertilizing schedule, no seasonal fuss. Bumblebees and hummingbird moths show up for it on their own. This one is hardy in most of the country, roughly zones 3 through 8, so cold winters are rarely the thing that takes it out. A clump planted several years ago is still producing the same volume of flowers today. No division, no replanting, nothing. An August planting of Caradonna will look modest this year. That's expected, and it's fine. What you're buying with a late summer planting is a root system that's already anchored before the first hard freeze, so next May it comes up swinging instead of spending its whole first real season just trying to settle in. Number 10, Nepeta Walker's Low, Catmint. 5 months of continuous bloom is a big claim for any perennial to make honestly, and Catmint actually delivers on it. From late spring through the first frost, Walker's Low produces wave after wave of soft lavender blue flowers, and it does it in almost any sunny spot with no supplemental anything once it's through its first season. It spreads, and the spreading is genuinely useful rather than annoying. It fills out by clump expansion, not by sending runners under the fence into your neighbor's yard, so it grows into the empty spaces you forget to weed without taking over the plants next to it. A small plant put in during spring or summer will be a couple of feet wide by fall. Give it a couple more years and that clump doubles again. Bees love it, rabbits and deer generally leave it alone, and if you want a version that won't self-seed at all, look for the sterile cultivar sold as Junior Walker. Either one does the job. If you've ever had regular mint take over a bed and refuse to leave, you already know why this distinction matters. Catmint behaves. It grows outward as one expanding clump you can see and manage, not as a web of underground runners popping up 3 feet away where you least expect them. Number 9. Sedum Matrona. If you already have an upright sedum in your yard, there's a good chance it's the old standby, Autumn Joy. It looks fantastic for the first several years. Then, usually around year 5 or 6, the clump splits open right in the middle and turns into a hollow ring with a dead center. At that point, you're either cutting it down hard every spring and hopping, or digging it out entirely. Matrona does not do this. The stems are sturdier and have a purple tint to them, and the clump holds its shape for 15 years and counting. If you've already watched your Autumn Joy split apart, this fall is a good time to swap it out. Here's the part that trips people up. Sedum wants lean, dry soil and full sun. It evolved on rocky, exposed ground, not rich garden loam. Give it the rich soil and consistent water a magazine tells you every perennial wants, and it gets floppy and weak. Give it poor, dry soil and leave it alone, and it holds itself upright and produces dusty rose flowers from late summer all the way through hard frost. This is genuinely one of the easier plants on this whole list to get right, mostly because the fix is doing less, not more. If you've been babying a struggling sedum with extra water and fertilizer, that's very likely the actual problem. Stop and watch it get sturdier. Number 8. Rudbeckia American Gold Rush, Black-Eyed Susan. The Black-Eyed Susan sitting in front of every office building and strip mall parking lot in the country is almost always goldstem. It's what the big chain stores default to. The problem is that goldstem is prone to a leaf disease called Septoria leaf spot, and by late summer the lower leaves are covered in brown blotches and starting to drop, even while the flowers up top keep going. American Gold Rush was bred specifically to resist that. The foliage stays clean from summer straight through fall. The flowers themselves are a bit smaller but more numerous, which actually gives the plant a fuller, denser look through its whole bloom season. Plant it in full sun, in pretty much any soil, and it will tolerate drought and summer heat without complaint. It self-cleans its spent flowers, so you don't need to deadhead it. By its 3rd year, the clump becomes a solid mass of gold that people notice from the sidewalk. If you want a shortcut to a professional-looking border, plant this in front of a taller ornamental grass, something like a little bluestem or a compact switchgrass, and let the gold flowers play off the fine texture behind them. That combination alone can carry an entire front bed with almost no other design work. Number 7. Echinacea purpurea, Purple Coneflower. This one matters more than almost anything else on this list, so pay attention here. Garden centers are full of flashy hybrid coneflowers in colors coneflowers were never naturally supposed to be. Bright orange, deep red, sunshine yellow. They look incredible in the pot. Independent multi-year trial gardens have tracked these hybrids and found that most of them don't survive past their 2nd or 3rd winter. The plain, old-fashioned purple coneflower, the species version with no fancy name attached, is the one that actually sticks around. Trial gardens have documented it living 20 years and beyond in the same spot. It has a deep taproot, it draws in every pollinator you could ask for, and it gently self-seeds to fill in the space around the original plant over time. Plant it in full sun to partial shade, water it through its first season, and then leave it be. In winter, don't cut the seed heads down. Goldfinches strip them for food, and the dried stems give your bed some visual structure at a time of year when almost nothing else is doing anything. If you love the idea of a coneflower, but you're set on trying one of the newer colored hybrids anyway, that's fine, just go in knowing what you're signing up for. Treat it more like an annual that might surprise you by coming back, rather than counting on it the way you would the species version. Number 6. Geranium Rozanne, Hardy Geranium. This is probably the most underrated plant on the entire list, and there's a decent chance you've never grown it, even if you've been gardening for years. It's been recognized as one of the best hardy geraniums available, yet chain garden centers still only carry it here and there. Rozanne blooms from late spring all the way through the first frost. Small periwinkle blue flowers, no deadheading required, no real decline through the season. It grows into a sprawling mound at the front of a bed and weaves itself gently in among taller plants nearby, without flopping over them or choking them out. Full sun to part shade, ordinary soil, water through the first summer, and that's the entire commitment. Plant 1 expects a decent filler for a season or two, and what you actually get is 15 years of a plant that just keeps showing up and blooming, almost like it enjoys the job. It also works beautifully in a large container if you're short on ground space, spilling gently over the edge for months at a time. Wherever you put it, the main thing to remember is that it doesn't want to be crowded out early. Give it room in its first season, and it repays you for the rest of its life. Quick roll call before we get into the final 5. Drop a comment with which of these you already have growing, and where you're watching from. I actually read every one of these, and it tells me which of these plants are easy to find where you live versus which ones you might have to track down at a specialty nursery. Number 5. Amsonia hubrichtae, Arkansas Bluestar. Here's a plant almost nobody asks for by name, and one that most chain garden centers simply don't bother stocking, probably because there's no big marketing push behind it. That's a shame, because it might be the best kept secret on this entire list. In late spring, soft sky blue, star-shaped flowers cover the whole plant. Through summer, it settles into fine, feathery green foliage that stays clean and attractive with basically no pest problems. Then in fall, the entire plant turns a bright, clear gold that you can spot from across the yard. That's 2 completely different seasons of real visual payoff from one perennial. Plant it in full sun to partial shade, in any reasonably drained soil, and after the first year it needs no supplemental water at all. Deer will not touch it. The clump settles in at about 3 feet tall and 3 feet wide, and holds that size for 2 decades without needing to be divided or replanted. This one is a native of the Ouachita Mountains, and part of the reason it's not everywhere yet is simply that no big marketing push ever attached itself to it the way it did for some of the other plants on this list. That's really the only mystery here. The performance has been there the whole time. Before we get to the last 3, a quick word of caution, because not everything marketed as low maintenance actually deserves a permanent spot in your yard. Lily of the Valley is a good example. It smells incredible and looks delicate, but it spreads through an aggressive underground root network that is genuinely hard to get rid of once it's established, sometimes surviving even 2 full years of being smothered under cardboard. On top of that, every part of the plant is toxic enough to be dangerous if a child or a pet ends up eating it. Russian sage is another one worth watching. It's gorgeous in a border, but the center of a mature clump often splits open and collapses unless it has something sturdy nearby to lean against. The lesson here is simple. Before you plant something because it looked good on a nursery display, it's worth checking what an independent, multi-year trial garden actually says about how that plant performs over time, not just in its first season. The first 8 plants on this list will fill your beds beautifully for years to come. The last 3 are a different category entirely. These are the ones that outlast the gardener. Number 4. Phlox Jeana, Garden Phlox. Garden Phlox has a reputation problem, and it's earned. Older, unnamed varieties are notorious for powdery mildew, a fungal issue that shows up by midsummer and can leave the plant looking scorched and grey by the time August rolls around. Jeana solves this. Independent trial evaluations have recorded it with the strongest mildew resistance of any garden phlox tested, and the foliage stays genuinely clean from early summer through fall. The flower clusters are smaller and more numerous than older varieties like the classic David, which actually means more butterflies and hummingbirds show up per square foot of bloom. Plant it in full sun in average soil, water it through its first summer, and then let it go. It comes back wider and fuller every single year for at least 15 years without ever needing to be divided. If garden phlox has burned you before, this is the one plant on the list worth a second chance. The mildew resistance isn't a marketing claim here. It comes from actual side-by-side trial garden comparisons, and it's the difference between a bed that looks tired by August and one that still smells like summer through October. Number 3. Hemerocallis Happy Returns, Daylily. If you drive past any commercial building in America, there's a strong chance you'll spot Stella d'Oro, the compact yellow daylily that's been the default choice since the 1980s. It's not a bad plant. It's just been marketed so heavily for so long that it's become the same tired choice in front of every strip mall and office park in the country. Happy Returns is the better version of the same idea. Same compact size around 18 inches, same yellow color, same rebloom habit from early summer into fall, but with a slightly softer, more open flower and none of the overexposed, planted everywhere look that comes with Stella. Plant it in full sun, ideally in small groups of 3, water through the first season, and then it becomes permanent. By its 5th year, it's a continuous ribbon of yellow blooming from early summer into fall. 15 years later, it's still doing the exact same thing, with no division ever required. Most nurseries still default to stocking Stella d'Oro, simply because it's what their supply chain is built around, not because it's actually the better plant. It's worth asking staff directly if they carry Happy Returns. Most do, even if it isn't sitting out front. Number 2. Baptisia australis, blue false indigo. In late spring, Baptisia produces tall blue flower spikes that look almost exactly like lupin. Here's the difference that matters. Lupin typically dies out within 2 or 3 years in most climates. Baptisia does the opposite. It gets more permanent every year. The reason is underground. This plant develops a taproot that can reach 8 to 10 feet deep within just a few years, and once that root system is established, drought, heat, deer, and disease stop being real threats to it. It simply becomes part of the landscape. There is one important catch. It takes about 3 years to really show up. Small the first year, a little bigger the second, and then somewhere around year 3, it goes from modest perennial to full-sized, shrub-like presence almost overnight. Once it's in the ground and settled, do not attempt to move it. That deep taproot makes relocating the plant nearly impossible after its second year, so choose its spot carefully the first time. After bloom, the flower stalks turn into dark, decorative seed pods that rattle in the wind through fall and get stripped clean by goldfinches over winter. Properly sited, Baptisia anchors the same spot in a garden for 25 years or longer, without division, without babying, without much of anything from you at all. Number 1. Peonies. Somewhere right now, there's a peony still blooming every spring in the yard of a house that's changed owners 2 or 3 times, planted by someone who isn't around anymore to see it. That's not an exaggeration. Properly planted peonies are known to bloom reliably for a century or more in the exact same spot, with no division and no replanting, ever. Here's the part that decides everything, and it's the single most important detail in this whole video. Peonies fail to bloom almost exclusively because of one mistake: planting the crown too deep. The pink growth buds at the top of the root, called the eyes, need to sit at a very specific depth. In colder regions, that's about 1 to 2 inches below the soil surface. In warmer regions, even shallower, barely covered at all. Bury that crown just a few inches too deep and something strange happens. The plant does not die. It grows healthy green leaves every single spring, for years, and it simply never flowers. The root system is fine. The plant just doesn't get the signal it needs near the soil surface to make the shift into blooming. So if you plant only one thing from this entire list with real care, let it be this one and get that depth right. Once it's in correctly, a peony asks for almost nothing. No dividing, no yearly fertilizer after the first couple of years, very little in the way of pests or disease. It just blooms every spring, for longer than most of us will be around to see. 11 plants: Salvia Caradonna, Catmint Walker's Low, Sedum Matrona, Black-Eyed Susan American Gold Rush, Purple Coneflower, Geranium Rozanne, Arkansas Bluestar, Garden Phlox Jeana, Daily Happy Returns, Baptisia, and the Peony. Some plants fill a gap in your yard for a season or 2. A few of them become part of the actual land, still blooming long after the person who planted them is gone. That's really what this list is about, not decoration, permanence. If you'd rather plant something once and actually mean it, subscribe, because that's the whole point of this channel. And before you go, tell me in the comments which of these 11 you're planting this August, and where you're gardening from. I read every single one.